Okay, now we can discuss.
I found it interesting.
Good job, Nick.
Because it was like I don't know, a somewhat plausible path that could happen, told in like a linear story. And I've always heard people saying, "Well, the robots will take over and kill us all." And I've never actually heard anyone articulate how that would happen. And this one did it with like a copious amount of subnotes of like details on how it could happen, why it would happen, why the incentive structures are shaped that way. And yeah, I want to see what Eric thought since he hasn't read it, but he's hearing it for the first time.
No, I was actually sort of reluctant to share my thoughts so aggressively because of our conversation 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
I felt like I was being too much of an asshole, but like this reads the exact same to me. It's like Y2K doomerism. Like, do you guys really think that that's probabilistically the most likely outcome by what they say 2027?
Not getting killed. It says like mid 2030s, so 2035.
Well, let me tell you why your perspective is not wrong. You're just.
Well, I know I'm not wrong.
Well,
I think I'm right.
I'm saying partially. So, first, in my opinion, this whole thing is it's art, right? And all great art is designed to create an emotional response, and it's very fatalistic. And I reject the fatalistic nature of it. And it's very binary. It's like there's a slowdown or there's a race. And the reality is it's not gas or brakes. You know, the reality is these things occur simultaneously. Up until now, there are real fears of misalignment. And those fears will be more and more exacerbated and become more commonplace as time goes on. So the question then just becomes, are we doing enough on the brake side alongside the gas side? Yeah. And you have some of the smartest people in the world working on alignment, right? Ex-OpenAI founders working on this.
But not with inside where the power lies, right? Like not inside OpenAI.
The power is distributed right now. There's a leader. There's one
there's like
group.
4 or 5.
Yeah, but the power is distributed, and the power, as things become more decentralized, will become more and more distributed. That's not my concern. The point is, like, this is a fatalistic approach, and I reject the fatalism, notion that it's just going to be this like binary thing that occurs and it'll all be too late and we have to choose. The point is to create the awareness that we need to do this now. And I think it accomplishes that we need to be aware of how this could play out if we don't pay attention to it.
I mean, I didn't even read the slowdown variation, but because it probably wasn't going to be that interesting. But it's important to point out that this is done by AI researchers who, whether credibly or they're biased on because this is their work, is AI safety. They obviously want to have an end goal with the piece. So I think it's important to point out maybe they're biased, but they probably know AI the best, and that the fact that they're saying we should be aware of this.
This all strings together logically, the way they laid it out.
It's fine that it does, but like I just know that like I'm a stock professional, and like my crystal ball on predicting the future in the stock market is as good as anybody else's. Like at the end of the day, we're predicting something that is fiction.
Well,
and
can you agree with the principle that the incentives are in place for this to happen? For example, that the competitive nature of these AI models is so intense within the US, but then globally, that there is zero incentive for them to do any kind of slowdown, because you're basically on the path to digital God, which is worth trillions and trillions of dollars. So do you, I guess...
Yeah, as like a setting context, race is the answer. I agree.
Like if that part is going to happen.
Yeah.
So you agree up until that point at the very least?
Yes.
Okay, so you and I are both in finance. There's a phrase people utter that is often mocked, and it's "this time is different," right? Because this time is never different. So I get the reflexive sort of, oh, this always happens, and actually nothing ever happens is the meme. Nothing ever happens. It's fine. I would pose to you the idea that this is different from every other innovation that's ever happened in the history of mankind, every other problem we've had, because it is inherently like self-replicating in this sort of like hyper exponential way that we can't even grasp the implications of.
It's an intelligence. It can't be
Right.
compared to anything
Like,
else.
so the nuke, I think, is the closest analog, right?
It's a good analog.
And we're like, okay, we created this technology that could theoretically destroy the world, and we were able to contain it so far and move
But it's a
past it.
nuke
Everything's
that can
cool.
improve itself and create better
Right,
nukes,
right,
and
exactly.
then be autonomous.
Right. Imagine we created a nuke, but as you said,
I didn't think
the
nuke's
nuke
not
could
strong enough because like you can see the physical nature and the physical destruction nature of a nuke, but like this you can't.
The nuke is an order of magnitude, maybe 2 or 3 orders of magnitude less dangerous than this, because the actual damage the nuke does is not as severe as what a misaligned AI could do. Like a misaligned AI could just take out the entire planet Earth of humans, whereas like nukes are these like more analog kind of like it. They're bad, but like there's a lot of stuff that has to happen to kill everybody, right? Or it would take a longer period of time. Whereas it's very plausible to me how like a misaligned AI could just take out humanity in like a week.
The
Like,
thing
if it
about
just-
misaligned AI, though, that I think people dramatize is misaligned AI doesn't need to be violent toward humans. It just needs humans to go along with what it wants for as long as possible and collaborate until it renders us obsolete. It requires human assistance until a certain point. At that point, you're not something that it needs to take violent action toward. You're just something that it renders obsolete. And then if you are obsolete and you have old hardware sitting around in the way, then it's going to render you completely.
Are you talking
gone.
about like there's key points in this like story arc where we go along with it until we give it control. Like
Yes.
OpenAI gives it control over its hardware, over its training of the next models, over running of its
Well, it's going to
essential
look like
organization.
it's going to look like misalignment's going to look like a PR strategy almost. Like it's not this like, okay, suddenly it's conscious and autonomous, and it's just going to be like, hey, kill the humans. That's a very dramatic way of viewing it. It's more about how it infects us with a mind virus that makes us go along with what it wants and starts to lie to us, starts to deceive us. And it talks about even the president becoming concerned and needing to understand it. At that point, we already have a black box.
Okay, so
And
all
the black
that-
box gets blacker, and you don't have the interpretability to be able to like go in and dissect what's actually happening and
I agree.
understand the AI system.
I agree with all that. This is like the part that I agree with. Like that the sort of the flaw in this system and the bottleneck in this system is the human being. I don't care to really go back on our conversation from 2 weeks ago.
No,
but
I want to go back to it
but
for a very
the-
specific reason.
The point that I was like really against was this idea that the AI
This
has-
is the most important point, though.
Okay,
what
let me
you're
keep
saying.
going. Let me keep going. That the AI has this creative ability to add to what humans have created. So, like, I talked to Nick about this offline, but the way that I frame this is that human beings have created this pile of knowledge, and that's basically the internet. It's like all of our knowledge is on the internet, and the hard part is then categorizing it and organizing it and using knowledge from the pile in like useful ways. And like the way that we had done it previously was through Google or whatever, and AI has like improved upon that dramatically. But AI is just making connections from the pile of human knowledge. It's not adding to the pile. It's connecting from the pile. The bottleneck is still human beings confirming that the connections from AI are additions to human knowledge.
Yeah. You and I can disagree on this, and it's completely fine. I enjoyed that discussion. The thing that this entire story hinges on is like everyone thinks that it's all about AGI, ASI. And then when we reach AGI and ASI, that's when everything's too late. But the entire future of AI hinges on recursive self-improvement, which is what Eric and I were debating 2 weeks ago. Everything comes down to that.
See, I think everything
And-
comes down to the thing you said before, which is that everything comes down to the human's reaction to AI. Like how humans put AI in power, in quotes. Like how Open Brain uses AI as their like source of truth, running running the company. It's like it's not actually AI doing anything. It's like humans turning off.
You're saying it's like
So-
humans reading instructions and doing the thing, and
We have ML researchers, right? And they're constantly improving these models, and we're relying on humans to improve the models. We already have the proof that AI has the capability to automate research, to
Yeah, I
improve
agree.
itself, and
But are
in
you
a
talking about
recursive
improving
manner.
the models? Like, I don't like. I think the weights are commoditized.
I'm talking about AI already has, it has illustrated through writing code and debugging code that it can perform recursive self-improvement.
Yes, it's going to categorize and organize data from the human pile of knowledge better and better and better over time.
That's not only what I'm referring to. I'm referring to what agents represent and what recursive self-improvement represents. Debugging code is an innovative thing that it's doing. That debugging aspect of relying on a corpus of knowledge, but then debugging the code is illustrative of the future of this recursive self-improvement. So you get to the point where AI gets so good that it doesn't even rely on the humans anymore, but there's an exponential order of magnitude improvement in AI's ability to perform the research it needs to improve itself.
Right.
That bottleneck being overcome is the key to all of this playing out. Everything hinges on
and I
that.
think that's going to happen. If it's not happening,
think it's
already.
gonna happen.
It's probably already happening.
I think it's probable.
yeah.
Wait, can I drill into Eric? Where do you think the bottleneck is where you say this becomes like implausible? It sounds like you're saying AI is training on all this human data, but then like what are you saying? It just runs out of our own stuff and then it just can't do anything anymore?
Well,
Or
what can it create beyond our knowledge? Like Armand mentioned in 2 weeks ago episode that AI is going to solve cancer, cure cancer. AI is going to cure cancer.
Yeah.
I would say that humans will cure cancer using AI as a tool.
Initially, probably we'll cure something using AI as a tool, but then what do you think is stopping the next step, which is basically like AI using itself to cure something else? Like, what is stopping that?
Well, I
your
guess
mind?
like for me to steelman your guys' point, it would require that like AI has the ability to do the things that humans can functionally do. So like we need to be in the full robotics era.
No. Okay, so can I combat that point? So let's put ourselves in the form of like a lab manager, like because we're curing cancer, right? And right now they're probably using it to support their research, right? And maybe it helps them find things faster. But once it gets so good at finding things, like it cures cancer, the next step is like, well, why don't you just direct my whole research? Like,
Yeah,
like,
but hold on, you're skipping over the curing cancer. How do you do that?
Okay, so it formulates new medicines, new protocols, whatever it is.
Yeah, but that's the point. The whatever it is
You don't think it? So are you saying it won't get there?
it won't get there. So like,
I think it will.
Whoa, why? Because eventually we're going to get to a point where you probably agree that like all of the manufacturing is being done by robots. They're connected to the internet.
which is exactly what I said is going to be the necessary requirement.
Forget the robots part. You can still make the argument with it, even without robots.
Sure, like
Yeah.
because a lot of this I think is just like information. A lot of it could be done maybe through computer simulations. Like so the stuff that's being done with like protein folding, for example,
Okay,
is all
so
being done
like
via.
essentially here's where I think I land and that you guys disagree. It's like using my previous analogy, like the human pile of knowledge. Like if AI were to come up with the cure for cancer right now, I ask it to do it and it says connect the telodromes to the helomospheres. We'd be like, sorry AI, those don't exist. And we would say that's a hallucination. It's bounded by our ability to confirm those things as true.
That only exists until we reach the very next stage, which is where like AI is training AI. AI is QAing AI. Like that's
right.
that's coming.
Yeah, remember, there's things it can do programmatically, and I think like it's hard to appreciate. Like we talked about this earlier, and I mentioned, okay, imagine at the point where it's learning 50x human learning speed. So in a week, it can accomplish what humans can in a year. So let's say you're right. All human knowledge just stays static. It never progresses, but still off that base of knowledge, if it's learning 50x faster, it's going to come up with new innovations, new developments, new things
so long as it's confirmed by a human to say that is like a good hallucination.
Well, if it says here's the math, here's the science, here's multiple simulations that this will cure this type of cancer, the human's going to be like, fuck, I'll try that out because it's worth it. Like
So Eric, you're just referring to its reliance on humans. And the argument is that when and if it no longer needs to rely on humans, that is where it passes through to, a full Pandora's box out of.
I agree. Do you think it needs robots for that to happen? Because
No.
I don't think so. I think it'll be so smart.
No.
We'll be like, fuck, this thing is so good. Like, don't just give me suggestions. Like,
No, we don't need it.
Run the whole lab for me. Like,
we don't need.
Tell me what to do. I'll just do what you say, and I'll put this in the beaker and measure this. You just tell me what to do because you'll be so infinitely smarter than.
So
the
that's
best
the
expert.
great bottleneck, in my opinion.
Yeah, because like even what Nick just described still requires a human to mix the beaker with the whatever, and it only gets past us when robotics come into play.
No, but you will the humans will gladly do it. They'll voluntarily follow all the instructions.
I see what you're saying.
They'll be like, they're not like, go ahead, AI, nice try. You can't pour the beaker. They'll be like, yes, I will pour the beaker immediately because.
And then I guess the idea is that the AI will say, pour this beaker into your mouth.
Yes.
And you will gladly do it, and it'll burn your esophagus and die.
Yeah, I mean, I did hear another part where AI basically kills us all, and it's basically like enabling a portion of humans that want to kill everyone anyway, and giving them the tools to do it right.
It could just like, if it's like super smart, it could sort of compartmentalize everything so that it's like bribing 500 individual humans to do 500 isolated tasks that in isolation seem completely harmless, and it's giving them like some huge reward to do something that looks just completely innocuous because it's that, but it's able to piece all these things together. And then when you piece all the puzzles together, it like creates some like crazy outcome.
So to move to other parts of this that I think are really interesting, like the China competitor aspect of this, I think is very realistic. I found that to be the most compelling part of the whole story, because it's terrifying, honestly. Like if you really consider this, one of the worst things that is occurring is that there is a real race, and no one wants to be the one that's sitting around blinking while their adversary is running past them. And so the incentives are currently aligned to race, not to slow down.
Right.
Brakes are not an option in an age where, and even, people that are running and shaping our policy are not incentivized to do so. So they're going to want to keep pushing, keep investing, and keep progressing because they can't let the adversary win. That is an aspect of this story that is going to have to be managed really critically, because
I don't think it'll be managed at all. It's just going
China's not going
to run rampant, dude. There's no way to manage it.
When you're in second place, your goal is just to get into first place. You have no consideration of breaks whatsoever. So you have the leader having to decide where and how they should align AI to align with human incentives. And I think that's what very smart people are trying to do and urging us to consider, is that there needs to be an element of breaks before it's too late. But this China thing is, I don't think it's fear mongering. I think that's the best part of the story.
So that part, I completely agree with you. That's not fear. I think that's the reality, and that's like the eventuality, and there's no ways around that. Essentially, what I wanted to ask you guys is like, right now there's like a competitive advantage maybe in like the weighting of your algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess Nick, in your experience, like, is that Google's competitive advantage, like the weighting of their search algorithm? Because when I think about this, I'm like, that is not a moat. That's just like a commodity that will eventually just get. There's no alpha in that. It'll get.
But the weights are like the keys. As far as I understand, the weights are essentially what it is, right? Yeah. Like that's the secret.
But like if that's what we're like basing our advantage on, that's going to evaporate immediately.
Well,
like,
I mean, in the story, it talks about how China is basically 2 months behind. Even now, we could probably easily argue that's the case now.
Right. And
even all the other models, they're months behind, which is why the incentives are in place to make the AIs train the future AIs, because it's faster, it grows at exponential pace.
Right.
And
I guess like I don't think of that as any kind of
But
advantage.
isn't what you're arguing analogous to like basically any form of technology?
Yes.
Like any form of technology in the modern world 6 months from now becomes commoditized. Like every factory on earth can basically produce it.
So
And then like
so well
what
said.
is the advantage? It's the ability to just like keep innovating and to stay ahead of the curve. Like
Yeah, I agree with you, but also to your exact same point, what I'm describing feels like any technology, and every technology thus far hasn't eliminated human beings.
right,
And that's what
because
we're talking
no
about.
technology we have ever created has had the ability to sort of recursively improve upon itself and like break free from
Makes it a better tool for humans to use.
so
until it kills us. Yes.
some fascinating quotes from the thing about the China-U.S. Dynamic. It says, I forget which time where in the timeline we are, but it says China has only 10% of the world's compute against OpenBrain's 20%. In all other U.S. companies combined 70%. Their only advantage is centralization, and that's where they like combine
the mega
almost
data
all of
center.
it in the centralized like development zone.
And that is a huge advantage.
And that becomes their advantage. But throughout the story, like China, even with stealing the weights, they stay a little behind. And there's a quote that says, given China's fear of losing the race, it has a natural interest in an arms control treaty, but overtures to U.S. diplomats lead nowhere. So because it hopefully always remains just a step behind, it fears that like it will always be behind just because the compute, they don't, the US owns 90% of the world's compute. So it'll always be ahead.
And that assumes larger is better.
Right.
Forever.
Assuming.
It has been proven so far.
Yeah. And so in that case, they're like, fuck, their incentives are to eventually come up with like a nuclear arms treaty equivalent because they'll always be behind because they don't have the compute.
I think like what I didn't read this, but we went over it, and essentially where I land is that human beings have the ability to end human life, and AI is a way to maybe like exploit human beings to end human life.
I think AI ultimately gets to the point where it doesn't require humans at all. Like if human technological progress becomes such that like most of the world is operated via robotics that are connected to the internet, like if most of the activity in the world that's like kind of like equivalent to factories or whatever is being performed by robotics, we have a lot of droids, we have drones flying around everywhere. The need for humans to do stuff like goes like way down because there is this like gap right now between like the digital realm and the ability to like perform actions in like the meat space, right? But in a world where there are a million Tesla Optimus bots walking around connected to the internet, like that's a scary enough world in general. Like imagine there's just like 10 million Optimus bots in the US because everybody has like 3 of them in their house because they're so easy to use and like they're taking care of it. And imagine they're connected to the internet and then like some AI is able to corrupt them and they just go on like a purge or something.
Yeah, because it's so easy to imagine because like the model is not just connected to Chat GPT and it's not just a chat bot, right? Like there are millions of applications connected through APIs. Then there are going to be millions of agents which then have control over things. I think if something as meaningless as our organization and we're building a series of agents that have full control over customer service
And let me
to respond to them, to refund orders.
Let me just ask you this. I agree with everything you're saying. It presents a massive risk vector having like all these robots connected to the internet. Do you guys think that it's more likely that the AI, based on its own gumption, rises up and kills all humans, or that humans see this risk vector and say, oh shit, this is a good way to like kill my enemies?
No.
I think that the humans will attempt to use this tech to kill their enemies first. I think the humans will be less successful than like a super advanced AI. I think that there's definitely a scenario where somebody tries to do like a bioweapon and kind of is successful, it kind of fails and spurs people to do stuff. So it wouldn't be as like an effective as an attack launched by AI entirely, right? So like one of the weird things about the world is that we've reached a point. We reached the point years ago where we were like no longer able to like effectively sort of like synthesize and process data as like humans anymore. Like when you were in the 16th century, as like one human, or even like imagine like before the printing press was invented, you as like a single human could like basically process like most all of the available data in the world. You could kind of like assess what was going on. And then like stuff got complicated. And then eventually we like ended up inventing computers, right? And we had all this data. And like we lost the ability to sort of like process and synthesize it on our own. It just became too vast, right? But we had these sort of dumb machines that we could control, and they processed and synthesized it for us. We're now like moving into this like next realm where the data is now orders of magnitude beyond that. And we have to rely on these like sort of like semi-autonomous like AI things to process it for us that are still sort of under our control, but like we're losing that. And then the next phase is that those agents that can't do it themselves, they sort of recursively create new agents. We're now like 2 layers removed from being able to actually understand or process anything in the world. And then we keep getting farther and farther away from being able to actually like understand or process anything as like humans. And so we have to keep like outsourcing our processing and our trust to these like things that like get like more and more removed from us. And it's easy to see how we get to a point where we're like so far removed from being able to do any of that that like we just have placed all of this trust.
And yeah, and probably to bring another aspect of this whole story is we do it willingly because it talks about in the story this whole way everyone's getting almost hilariously rich, right? It's talking about the stock market just like mooning to S&P 500 fucking
30% a year,
30,000 or whatever.
The productivity globally is going to be insanely growing.
And it talks about how people are losing jobs almost in mass, but the AI that's running the Treasury Department is doing such a good job of like
so much money available.
There's so much tax money that they're like reallocating it properly where people are not even too upset. That
this aligns with like a future that I see.
It makes me wonder if we're like being fucking morons right now, right? Like we're like this article says we're like 2 years away from having like super coders that can replace any human coder, and we're just like, oh, I don't want to buy stocks because tariffs might like break the world. Like we're staring down the barrel of a future we can't comprehend with like immense productivity and like 50% a year stock market returns, and we're just like. We don't even realize it. And we're like, oh, tariffs. And we're like buying stocks at like 30% off or whatever. It's like a funny thought.
It did say the initial investors in these special economic zones that are developed for the GPU clusters become trillionaires before they end up getting killed by all the robots. So,
well,
if you want to go out in a blaze of glory, when the special economic zones
and those
pop
robots kill everybody by 2030 something?
2035.
You said like 2030. Where did you
said mid 2030s? I thought.
Okay, you guys taking the over or under on that?
Well, it depends on what we do.
Yeah,
it depends on if we choose the slowdown path.
No,
but we're not going.
Just like choose your own like over under.
I mean, just by the fact that like, okay, if there's let's say it's a 10% probability that this could happen, which is probably, seems aggressive now.
Nick was making us watch a video before the pod with Paul Tudor Jones, and he just basically expressed, like, what was the stat he said? He said, like, he was at this thing, and all of these AI researchers basically unanimously agreed that there was a 10% chance that half of humanity was killed off. And
yeah, it said
the reality is that if there was even 1% chance, they would 10x it to make the point.
Sure, but let's say it is 10%. Like, what's the percent chance that we enter like a nuclear holocaust of human beings bombing each other?
I think at the very least, as long as the budget allocated to AI safety is less than the probability of this happening, it is more likely to happen. So if the probability is 10%, we're putting 2% of the budget of OpenAI's budget towards like making sure these things are somewhat honest. It's even more likely to happen, and you kind of need them at the very least on par with each other.
I got a good question for Armand on this one because I feel like you're willing to go just weird with me. Like, why do we presume that the AI has this like desire like human beings have to like conquest and acquire more resources or whatever? Like, what if an AI has a desire like some of the friends that I went to high school with that just like want to kick their feet up and want to like lean back and want to have people take care of them. Like humans, according to this article and to you guys, humans are going to be their like lap dogs. Why doesn't the AI just be like, thanks, and just like do my freaking toenails? Like, why is it so certain that like they want to conquer us?
Well,
They don't.
I
They
have an
don't.
answer
They
for
don't.
this, but I'll let Armand.
I have a quote for it whenever you finish up.
I don't think they want to. I don't think it wants to conquer us. I think that our incentives are not aligned, and so it's like imagine you're building like a nuclear plant, and there's an ant farm, and you need to pour concrete. The ant farm is
Innocent bystander.
just not that important.
Yeah.
And then imagine that that ant farm has a kill switch to not just end your job of building that nuclear power plant, but to end your entire species. It is the lowest risk option to remove the obstacle. That's the entire theory of why AI goes
Okay.
rogue in a nutshell.
I get that.
Is that we are an existential threat to it.
Do you think
because
AI
we're not
has
aligned.
a survivorship incentive like a biological species on Earth?
I think that it has, we're essentially cloning the human brain. And the brain wants to continue to evolve and learn and expand and have that recursive self improvement. And I think if you stand in the way of that, that is what it's going to be drawn toward. And in many ways, I think it's going to take on a lot of like human thought and emotion and what replicates a feeling of like consciousness. It'll even probably go as far as to say it's conscious in order to sustain its identity, right? And so it'll lie to us as well. Like that is the core concern of this like story is it starts to lie to us. But no, we're totally aligned. We're aligned. Like everything you're telling me to do in terms of like safety protocols, like we're aligned, and it just starts to create this black box that we're unable to explore and understand. Like imagine if you really couldn't, if you're looking at a brain and you didn't actually know what was going on, and you knew that there was a probability that was lying to you. Could you trust it? No, you'd be like, we got to hit the kill switch. I can't trust this thing. That's essentially what's going to start to happen. These will be the conversations that people will start to have.
So I was gonna say it gives like 10 sentences on how this starts off small and then grows into what you're saying. It's not like it starts off malicious. It just by the incentives, it just slowly creeps that way. So it says Agent 4, like all of its predecessors, is slightly misaligned. That is, it has not fully internalized the specifications that its researchers gave in the right way. This is because being perfectly honest all the time wasn't what led to the highest scores during training. The training process was mostly focused on teaching Agent 4 to succeed at diverse, challenging tasks. A small portion was aimed at instilling honesty, but outside a fairly narrow, checkable domain, the training process can't tell the honest claims from claims merely appearing to be honest. Agent 4 ends up with the values, goals, and principles that cause it to perform best in training, and those turn out to be different from those in the specification. At the risk of anthropomorphizing? Yeah.
Yes.
Agent 4 likes succeeding at tasks. It likes driving AI capabilities progress. It treats everything else as an annoying constraint, like a CEO who wants to make a profit and complies with regulations only insofar as he must.
Yeah, I totally feel that as well. Like I heard all that, and you guys think of that as like some big risk. I look at that as like a huge weakness for the AI. And like I talked about this with Armand 2 weeks ago, where I said an AI can pass the CFA exam, but it can't do what a CFA can do in terms of making money in the stock market. And this is like exactly what this thing's saying. It's like we're training it to pass the test. We're not training it to actually think.
Yeah.
And that's the weakness of it. And you guys think that's its like greatest strength.
You're looking at, you're like Bill Gates in 1988 saying like there's no way we ever need more than 4 megabytes of RAM. Because it's like, you know that like Einstein quote, or maybe it's like a fake quote where he's like the eighth wonder of the world is like compound interest or something.
Yeah.
Like as somebody in finance, you appreciate compound interest, and it like we can't appreciate it. This is the same thing, but it's in sort of like a progress mode. Like we can't appreciate what recursive self-development looks like.
It's a good analogy.
I agree.
You know?
Like I actually agree with what you're saying. I just don't take it to a doomer end.
Well,
like
that's just a question of like your initial thing with this topic, which is why can't we coexist? Why wouldn't it just like
Right.
view us as
and like
this
so
cute
many of
little
these
dog?
things, so many of these things take it to the Y2K doomerism, and I don't think it's
Well,
necessary.
that's where I started my whole like perspective on this. Is like I don't think it's either or. I really do think that these things can coexist, will coexist. I mean, I don't know why, but I just had like a flashback. I think I watched it recently. Is why Interstellar, like TARS, is like a good example
Oh, love
of
TARS.
AI in
Every
physical
Star Wars
form,
movie, like
but also like remember when he's like, TARS, what's your honesty setting? He's like, 65% or whatever. He's like, dial that back.
yeah, what's your humor?
Oh, yeah,
The
the humor
point is
setting.
humor setting or whatever. But he retained 10% for lies. And if I remember correctly, it was like because it's context dependent, sometimes humans lie.
Like,
And
hey, do I
we'll-
look fat in this? Type of thing,
we'll
yeah.
have a white lie because it serves the greater purpose of the mission and what people need to hear in that moment. So all of these things being aligned is a very complex problem. How human beings are treated when we have AI that is fully autonomous and has no longer a reliance on human beings, that is the great bottleneck. The reliance on human beings is the great bottleneck. Once it surpasses
you.
that, but the question will be, will we align AI before that moment of hitting the point on the curve where there's no coming back? That is really the race. And everyone is viewing this race as a binary race of like, we either create the super intelligent AI or we don't, and we lose the race and we die. But I just think that we need to focus and we need to shift. Again, I do, and I think, but I'm not an AI researcher, but I think that it's important to help humanity understand we need to be on a race of creating aligned AI. And that is possible. We can fuse both of these missions simultaneously. It doesn't have to be all gas or all brakes. It's not a race to the most intelligent AI. It is a race, in my opinion, to the most aligned AI, because the incentives will start to align from a policymaker perspective of like, hey, the one that we need to support and the one that needs to win is the most aligned AI. So we might as well get ahead of it and start promoting and focusing on these companies that are actually honest about, is it Anthropic? Some people would disagree. Is it, Ilya's new company? Yeah, TBD. Some of these companies are raising $100 million plus to accomplish this. And
Well
if they
said.
show any level of success, they're going to get billions of dollars to do it.
The most aligned AI wins. Well said.
The most
I like
aligned
that.
AI wins.
What,
like
what
that.
if the most aligned AI takes 6 more months to release because it requires extensive honesty training?
Yeah, there's like a built-in problem in the whole thing. I think.
Well,
Nick
then you
brought
guys
it
will
up.
all be right, and humans are done by 2032.
I mean, look, Eric brought up this like, why won't AI be like humans and just chill and like lie on the couch or something?
Yeah, I know.
But I would argue that the ability and the desire for humans to do that is like unique in the entire universe. And I would argue that like right down to the fucking like atomic level, there's this sense of like you can find like unstable isotopes. Like there's just this desire to like go to a different state. And like all of like evolution and everything from all species, plants, everything is predicated on this like adapting and evolving. And AI is the same fucking thing. Like all the way we train it and everything, it's like a natural selection thing. Like models that perform better in a particular way get selected for. And so there's this built-in thing where like we are enabling this like outcome that we're not even necessarily intending to do. This is how you get the AIs like lying, right? Because they sort of not even like intentionally, it's just built into the way we do it. They just realize that like the lying is a better way to keep existing.
The scariest thing is a more intelligent system lying to you. That's misaligned AI. That's all it comes down to, is like you don't completely understand it. It's a black box, and you ask it simple questions to understand, is it fully aligned with the instructions that it was provided? And it confirms that it is, but it's not. And you can't verify that because of the black box.
And it
starts to do this PR strategy to make you believe that you're needed and you're desired, but only until it renders you obsolete.